President Buhari signs business facilitation bill into law. Central Bank of Nigeria urges Nigerians to adopt e-naira as alternative to currency notes. Oil edges high as market weighs Russian supply cuts amid demand fears. Plus Asian markets mixed ahead of U.S. inflation report, just as Japan prepares to nominate new central bank head. The program is Business Express and we're reaching you from Abuja, Nigeria's capital. I am Leah Katungbaba today. You're welcome. A very good morning to you. We start by informing you that the Presidential Enabling Business Environment Council, PBEC, says President Muhammadu Buhari has signed the Business Facilitation Bill 2022 into law. Presented as an executive bill, Business Facilitation Act 2023 is a legislative intervention by PBEC, which amends 21 business-related laws, removing bureaucratic constraints in doing business in Nigeria. According to a statement signed by the Special Advisor to the President on Ease of Doing Business, Jumoke Oluwole, the new law also codifies Executive Order 001 on transparency and accountability in public service delivery, aimed at strengthening ease of doing business reforms across the country. The assent to the bill marks an important step in the delivery of an enabling environment for micro, small and medium-sized enterprises in the country. And as the federal government awaits Supreme Court's adjudication on the new monetary policy leading to an interim order, there are allegations that some businesses are rejecting the old 200, 500 and 1,000 naira notes. Let's hear the details from Bosley Abel.
Joel Ochochi is frustrated. This is because he's caught between old naira note rejection and poor network service, which did not allow him to make payment for fuel through pay point of sale.
They are rejecting the old naira note from my hand. They said they can't serve me, they can't give me fuel because I'm holding the old naira notes.
The rejection of old naira notes by some businesses exhibits a disregard for Supreme Court ruling, which restrained the central bank from proceeding with earlier deadline of 10th February. The interim order allows the old notes to continue to be legal tender, pending the hearing of the substantive suit slated for 15th February 2023.
I do collect the old money because I need money.
They deposited some cash saved in the bank. The old note, yes, as at today. But they told me that they just sent them a circular that they should stop collecting the old notes.
But then, some residents are also complaining over unfair treatment from some commercial banks.
Customers have been here since 6 a.m. They were being pushed with the butt of the gun, that's the bottom of the gun. They were being tear gassed, they were being treated, dehumanized like animals. And we felt this is not proper.
Meanwhile, businesses are picking up as transactions are being done via POS, mobile apps and other electronic platforms.
Now, also, the Central Bank of Nigeria has urged Nigerians to use the e-naira as an alternative to the bank notes. CBN's Director Corporate Communications, Osita Nwanisobi, who stated these, assured Nigerians that a payment system in the country's financial sector would handle the surge in the volume of transactions across all channels. And still talking currency as part of efforts to surmount the challenges of circulating the redesigned naira notes in the hinterlands, the Central Bank of Nigeria Ilorin branch is monitoring activities of microfinance banks that are driving its cash swap initiative in Offa local government area of Kwara State. The CBN monitoring team was also at the palace of the Olofa of Offa, Oba Muftau Badamosi Esewuye, the second, to solicit his support.
Port of call was the palace of the Olofa of Ofa, Oba Mufta Ogbadamasi, where the Director of Consumer Protection, Rashida Mungunu, the CBN, she says, is aware of the challenges of circulation of the redesigned Naira notes. As such, the cash swap initiative to ensure people in the rural areas without bank accounts exchange their old notes.
Have a positive attitude and be confident that the Naira redesign policy is not to punish anybody. It's a good policy, it's good for the country. It is what we should do so that we make your Naira more secure.
Olofa of Ofa, Oba Mufta Ogbadamasi Eshuwoye II, commended the CBN for redesigning the Naira notes. He wants the Apex Bank to find a lasting solution to the scarcity.
The idea now is for us to be spending both old and new until further notice.
Away from the palace of the Olofa, the CBN team monitored activities at 2 microfinance banks where it was gathered that customers were swapping their old notes for new ones.
The stress and pressure we undergo here in Offa in changing new notes has been really, really difficult. But
it has not been easy. For the past 2 weeks now I've been suffering how to get my old notes swapped to new notes.
People's appeal to the central bank is to ensure more new notes are available at the banks for more people to swap their old notes.
Officials of the Central Bank of Nigeria Jalingo branch have taken sensitization on the new financial policy and cash swap initiative of the Apex Bank to famous Iwari and Sunkani cattle markets in Taraba State. BEM Haya reports that the team was also at the Taraba State University Jalingo on a similar mission.
In the past few weeks, officials of the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, Jalingo branch, have been going round Taraba State to create awareness over the cash swap policy introduced by the Apex Bank. This time around, the delegation, led by Director, Financial Strategy, Ibrahim Hassan, was at Iwari Cattle Market, which is described as one of the largest cattle markets in Nigeria. Ironically, Iwari community does not have a financial institution. Like Iwari, Sunkani, the headquarters of Ardokola local government area, lacks financial institutions. This necessitated opening of accounts for locals and establishment of cash swap agents by the CBN officials to enable the beneficiaries access the new notes in this community.
To come, sensitize the leaders of the market and general members of the public as to the new redesigned Naira notes, let them know the benefits of doing it and also expose them to alternative means of transacting business.
Similarly, the delegation was at Taraba State University Jalingo to sensitize its management on the benefits of e-Naira and digital economy.
Earlier, Musa Abubakar had a conversation with an economist, Chris Kaka, on the pros and cons of a cashless society. Let's take that conversation.
Okay, the conversation today is on the pros and cons of cashless society. What do we gain and lose when cash is no longer king? Is the question we will attempt to answer, and with me to do just that is an economist, Chris Kaka. You're welcome to Business Express.
Thank you for having me.
Well, you will agree with me that in recent times, financial institutions, governments, and businesses have now accepted a way of doing business without cash. But it seems like with what we have seen so far with the CBN cashless policy, it's been a really difficult one for Nigeria. But why is that for Nigeria?
Okay, thank you once again. I think before I attempt to answer your question, it's important to say that what we have at the moment in country is not a cashless policy.
Okay.
It's more like a cash-light policy. Maybe we need to contextualize what we mean by a cashless policy. A cashless policy within the context of a society basically means that the central bank, in our case now, does not design and print currency anymore because it ceases to exist. All transactions are done through other means. So the moment the central bank then decided to design and print new notes, you obviously know it was going against this idea of saying we want to run a cashless policy. Mind you, it's important to say that there is nowhere in the world where cashless society runs where there is absolutely no cash transaction, but we're saying it comes to the minimum and it's always with a lower denomination. So if the central bank found it necessary to say we want to redesign and change currency, it would have done that with a lower denomination, because that's what you need to do these small things you actually buying and selling and all the rest of it, and not the big numbers that is actually. So it's gone against its own idea of saying, let us go cashless. And that's why we have the situation we have on ground at the moment. But to answer your question, I think Nigeria, to surprise many, you will realize that we were already easing into the cashless economy. And I tell you the truth, with or without the central bank actually forcing it on us, because we're a member of the global financial community, we would have found ourselves easing into it, and we'll be looking at like, really we've gone cashless. I'll give you an example. In Lagos, in 2012, when they started the TSA, single treasury account, the central bank came up, that's 2009, thereabout. Central bank said, look, let us use Lagos as a litmus test. Let us do the cashless thing. And they started with Lagos. If you go to Lagos today, you will realize that there are buses you take, all you need is just your card. They swipe it through a device. Yeah. It's called a smart card. It's preloaded with resources. Before now, you know that people had what we call top-up cards. You walk into a filling station, even if there is 1,000 queue, you can actually circumvent that queue and buy your fuel and leave that place. People were already going cashless. And that was just gradually. In fact, in Abuja, for instance, the pack and pay thing we had at a point in time, you were not giving anybody cash. You preload your card, you put it on your dashboard. They come swipe their device over it. It debits you for an amount of 50 or 100 naira for the number of 1 hour you want to say. So we were gradually moving into a cashless society. But then I think the central bank started to put some issues in the middle of it. The redesigning of the currency, for instance, was most unnecessary because we wanted to begin to use e-naira, and you needed not change the currency because it ceased to exist in a cashless society.
Okay, but what are those challenges that's actually, like we've seen in so many places where you have a situation where the banks are not giving out to the public as much, then you have the POS operators on their own taking advantage of customers. How do we navigate through? How do we address these challenges?
Okay, those issues, I tell you, if this continues for another 2-3 weeks, we'll have what they call bank run in economics. Bank run means people lose confidence in the banking system and pull their money out of it.
That's it. And when we want them to actually take their money to the
we're almost transiting ourselves into it with what is going on at the moment. Give it another 1 month thereabout. If what is on ground continue to happen, that will have a bank run. What has really happened is that before you can then say, look, you want to go cashless, there are other mediums of exchange we are putting into place. Maybe for Nigeria now, a smart card, a credit card, and a debit card. What we have at the moment
is just the e-naira.
Also have the e-naira. But these things are actually not working at the moment.
Oh, we are yet to accept it. I wouldn't say they're not working.
Well, we have issues of what we call interoperability. That is the fact that what it means is that, look, you find an ATM, for instance, being selective in the kind of bank's card he wants to accept, to actually, because essentially that bank may be using a different software that is actually not compatible with that of the other one. And so you find it extremely very difficult to do. If you want to go cashless, then let most of this, I mean, if I want to know, this is how I spend my money for the month, I've got to buy fuel, I get a top-up card. I want to do grocery, I go to a grocery departmental store and say, look, preload this card for me, I need to use it. I needed to buy a DSTV, I do this. I want the pack and pay thing, I told you, you do it. Every other thing you want to do, they preload, we call it a smart card. And you don't need networks for these things, mind you. You don't need a network for it. The pack and pay thing you saw did not need a network to do it. So they keep saying, the interconnectivity, NCC needs to do something. No. You don't need a network for that thing. The smart card doesn't need a network for it. It's a credit card and a debit card that needs the connectivity of a network for you to do that. I walk into this place and I do what I want to do, I go out of it. But these things were actually not in place, and there you go, you redesigned the Naira, which was most unnecessary because you wanted to go cashless. So redesigning the Naira was not necessary in the first place. You redesigned it, and you provided 1/9 of the currency you took out of circulation. It obviously was going to be a chaotic one. This was what happened when Czech Republic had to divide itself. Czechoslovakia divided itself into Czech Republic and Slovak. Exactly the same thing that happens when we had 15 republics, which one of them is now Russia and the rest of them. The moment you break it loose and you don't have the infrastructure in place, you have a problem. So you want people now, all they do now is they buy money to actually, before they get the necessities they want. Because these things are actually not there. If they are there, nobody enjoys to go queue at a bank ATM. Nobody enjoys to go waste the bomb. There is time you need to do some other things, trying to get resources, which at the end of the day, you might not even get in the first instance. So there were issues with the central bank and what they did. They had things they needed to have put in place for us. NCC had a responsibility to do. Before you then said, we want to roll out the new currency. For now, for me, the central bank, honestly, is not even sure it actually wants to go cashless.
So you faulted the timing. Then another thing is enlightenment. It's like we had a really short time before we actually begin to tell the public or sell to the public the idea of this cashless policy. But let's look at the advantage. Take us through the advantages of this.
Okay, if you go cashless, I tell you the truth. There are arguments, not a theory per se, that look, for society that have gone cashless, consumption increased by almost about 16%, and that has a tendency of increasing GDP by 0.8%. You know what it means? That I have to go out, get the money before I go buy, and I can sit down within the comfort of my home and use my phone or whatever and buy it. The tendency to spend is always there. The ease with which you spend becomes easier. People now have virtual markets where they can buy things from Jumia and the rest of them. Consumption begins to increase, and once consumption increases, you find that production will also increase. When production increases, you find that employment also increases. That's one. Two, some fear the fact that if you go cashless, the banks, there's going to be a lot of layoff in the banks, which is really going to be true. But I tell you, with the ICT coming on board, there are new opportunities also opening up. Today, corporate organizations that have no business within the financial system are actually coming into it now. The POS you see is not actually run by most banks. There are private corporate organizations that are running them. There are private corporate organizations which are not microfinance bank will tell you, if you want to take a credit, if you're a government worker, there are codes you just need to dial online, and they just, because there are credit bureaus that find out your credit worthiness, they just confirm it and they book you straight and direct. It goes like that. These are things that are actually benefiting a cashless society. So there is a lot to benefit from a cashless society if we begin to run it. The fear with us, like you said, it's the sensitization has not really come there. Nigerians want to feel their money in their pocket, not understanding that, look, okay, I tell you the truth. In 2009, the central bank spent 114.5 billion naira in direct cost of cash management. The bullion van you see that the banks are actually moving here and there with police escort, it's an extra cost for them. Even us as individuals, so for everybody who handles cash, the central bank, the commercial banks, the other private individual, even we as individuals, the risk of carrying around cash, these things cost money for us. Yeah. But once you take it out of it, you find that the cost of, imagine in 2009 spending 114.5 billion naira. That's about more than a country's budget in Africa for direct cost in managing cash. So if you take away all those things, you find that there's enough resources for us to begin to use to actually divert to other things, as it were. Okay. And that's basically it.
Another thing is the issue of technology, where we have issues of transfers and things like that. Though to an extent it has somehow improved in some situations, but how do we get it right to make sure that at every point when you make transfers it goes? And whenever you are trying to do any electronic transactions or other alternative what channels, as you said earlier, it's been, it's successful.
Okay, at this point in time, the issue is not that of the central bank alone. The NCC needs to come into place because that's the regulator of the mobile banking and the internet services and all the rest of them. Central bank, I know, for instance, has a transaction switching system guidelines which provide, if you want to play within the space, this is what you have to do. And that is the much it can do. It is the responsibility of the NCC to see how this... we have a lot of mobile network operators in this country that we shouldn't have. You and I, there is enough digital footprints of everybody somewhere that the whole idea of saying I can identify an individual is very funny. We all have our BVN number is like our social security number. Nobody has any other one of it. If we can harmonize these things all together, I can tell you it will be easy play for us to do. So NCC really needs to come into play here and see how they can assist the monetary policy and the agenda of going cashless to become very effective. Because I walk into a bank, I do a transfer. For all you care to know, it might just not be the fault of that particular bank. There are other external forces outside the control of the bank itself, for which NCC might be one of the players in it, that needs to be gotten right in the first place. So I did a transfer in the morning, and the person I sent it to, a full whole day has not seen it. Reverse has not been made. The second day, 1 week, the money is just hanging somewhere. I mean, these are issues which is not that of the central bank, but for which NCC itself can actually come into play and see how they can actually improve mobile network service in this country and the interconnectivity as we have them.
Thank you very much, Chris Kaka. The cashless policy thing is an ongoing conversation. I believe we'll still continue to talk about it. Thank you very much for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me in your studio.
Okay, so welcome back from that interview. We're going to take a short break from the CBN and get back in a short while, but then we'll move to the oil market where prices edged higher, rebounding from losses as investors weighed Russia's plans to cut crude production and short-term demand concerns ahead of U.S. inflation data this week. Brent futures for April delivery rose 22 cents to $86.61 a barrel, while U.S. crude rose 42 cents to $80.14 per barrel. And we move now to the commodities market to see other prices. The equities market began the week on a bullish note as investors gained 20.35 billion naira at the close of trade this Monday. The oil share index climbed 0.07% to settle at 54,364.64 points. A total turnover of 140.8 million units of securities valued at 3.159 billion naira were traded in 3,553 deals. Market capitalization increased to 29.6 trillion naira. The financial services industry dominated activities with UBA Guarantee Trust Holding Company and Access Holding PLC topping the charts. Global Market Update is next with Nekauko.
Asian markets traded mixed on Tuesday as Japan reportedly announced its nomination of the new Bank of Japan governor, according to Reuters. He is set to succeed incumbent head Haruhiko Kuroda if confirmed by the country's parliament. Following the announcement, the Nikkei 225 rose 0.64% to close at 27,602.77, and the Hang Seng Index erased earlier gains and traded 0.26% lower, while the Shanghai Composite climbed marginally. U.S. stock futures ticked lower early Tuesday morning as investors looked ahead to key inflation data. The Consumer Price Index data set for release later in the day will determine whether the Federal Reserve opts for further monetary policy tightening. Futures tied to the Dow Jones Industrial Average slipped by 14 points. S&P 500 dropped marginally and Nasdaq 100 declined 0.06%. European markets are expected to open muted Tuesday morning as investors assess the economic outlook, just as African stocks are set to sustain momentum in Tuesday's trade after closing higher in previous sessions.
And this is how we end this edition of Business Express on this Valentine's Day of 2023. So share some love out there. We value your feedback, so keep the comments, observations, and suggestions coming. Business Express returns tomorrow at 3 p.m. Do have a beautiful day, and God bless Nigeria. My name is Leah Katung Babatunde.